Tracy and Steve say if it wasn't for mental health charity Scarborough Survivors, they might not be here today. They all say the charity helped them through some of the darkest days in their lives, and they're urging the Chancellor to think again about her national insurance increases, which they say will hit grassroots charities like the Survivors really hard.
If it wasn't for all the staff, I would not be here. They just made me feel like home, and it's like one big family. If they had their hours cut down or they had to close the centre, the mental health in Scarborough will just go downhill really bad.
It's really, really unfair, and as a charity, all the money, every penny and pound that the charity gets, they need, and the government has done a really, really bad thing.
Apart from Scarborough Survivors, I don't have any friends. As soon as I mention epilepsy, which I'm epileptic, we don't want to know. But Scarborough Survivors and Kelly and Steve, they don't judge me.
Scarborough Survivors helps thousands of people every year, but its leaders say this moment means its future is far from secure.
In today's budget, I am announcing an increase in employers' national insurance contributions.
Chief Executive Andrea Woolcott says the charity was already dealing with an £18,000 gap in its finances, and the extra tax means it needs to find up to £20,000 more.
I'm really concerned that we will have to cut our opening hours or possibly make people redundant, which will have a negative impact on the amount of support we can give to our clients. And I absolutely agree for the calls for charities to be exempt from the national insurance contribution rise.
The Survivors are backed by Scarborough-born Sarah Elliott, who is Chief Executive of the National Council for Voluntary Organisations.
We will continue to call on the Chancellor to reconsider, because this is going to have a hugely detrimental impact on communities, on public services, and ultimately on the economy.
With no sign of a change of course from the Chancellor in this week's spring statement, it looks like some grassroots charities, like Scarborough Survivors, face some anxious months ahead.
That was Richard Edwards reporting from Scarborough. Well, Andrea Walcott from the Survivors Charity joins us here in the Politics North studio. Thanks for coming in, Andrea. A lot of talk this week about financial black holes. Where would this leave your organisation? What sort of black hole are you looking at?
Around about £40,000 at the least.
Due mainly to the national insurance?
Partly to the national insurance, but partly because our daytime service is currently underfunded to the tune of about £20,000. So for us to break even and keep the service as it is, it means we have to find another £40,000 at least.
What impact is that going to have?
Reducing the amount of hours we're open, so therefore reducing the amount of support we can provide to people. It could mean that the charity has to fold, which we're 31 years old this year, which would be an absolute travesty. It may be that we have to make staff redundant, which again impacts on the support we can provide to our ladies and gentlemen.
Sally Jameson, you must have heard similar claims from charities in your part of the world. Do you think the Chancellor should think again on this?
Look, I mean, I'm really sorry to hear of that, and I don't think anyone wants to see any charities fold at all. I think what Rachel Reeves did in the budget in the autumn was to try and get the economy back on a stable footing, because it was not beforehand, and that involved taking a number of difficult decisions. One of the things that I would say is that because of those difficult decisions, she was able to invest over £23 billion in our National Health Service. We've upped the employment attendance allowance to £10,500 for smaller charities and businesses. So there's a number of measures being put in place to try and improve public services as well. But
the truth is, a lot of charities are going to be picking up the pieces of government cuts elsewhere, like the cuts to benefits, aren't they?
Well, I think, again, as I said in my last answer, there's a green paper on that which is consulting at the minute, and I think it's really important that charities do feed into that and about the impact that cuts may have on them, or what support their service may need in order to help people going forward. And I think that's all part of the consultation and discussion.
Well, I put, again, to Conservative MP Kevin Hollinray whether the government was basically had no choice but to make difficult decisions in order to balance the books.
Well, again, the government just hasn't thought it through. You know, we voted last week to try and exempt hospices from the national insurance increase. So we've seen hospices hundreds of thousands of pounds in the red because of these changes. Though the government didn't say they were going to do this in its manifesto, it's hit everybody with these massive tax increases. So I think the government's got to compensate hospices and charities like the one you're featuring on the programme for the extra cost of those monies. I think that's the least it could do.
So what's your message to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, today?
Please reconsider what you're doing to grassroots charities that are non-for-profit organisations. We're not a large charity. There's many small charities like ours that are really, really going to suffer, but then the impact that's going to have in the wider community and the more pressure it's going to put on the health service, police, local authority, it's just false economy.